Hello everyone at home. In today's video, we're going to demonstrate how to disassemble and reassemble a Widespan. Before we get started, there are a couple things we need to go over. Material-wise, when you're starting, what materials you would need is you would need your valley board, you would need an art cart, you need a couple ladders, and a U-boat. With the U-boat, what we do is the U-boat will be used to put your beams on when you're ready to do it. Your ladders here will be for your partners when you go up and down the ladder to take everything off the shelf. Your art cart here will be used to put your wood, your particle board, and all of your grid inside there so that you have a safekeeping. And the valley board is used just in case you need to go up and down on a higher point that the ladders can't reach. Okay, so before we get started in disassembling and assembling the Widespans, the biggest thing here before we get started is you're going to want to pull your Widespans out enough that you can get to these back beams so you can take these off and get to all your supports and stuff in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull this forward. Okay. And as you pull it forward, you're just pulling it enough so that you can get back here with one hand or two hands so that you can take this off. For stores that you can't get into it, in stores that we go to, we have what's called, it's called an air shim. All right, and basically the air shim, you can put it in between here, pump it up, and it'll give you just enough support that you need so that you can get to your beams that are on the backside. So now we're going to go ahead and show you guys how to disassemble the Widespan. But before we get started, there are a couple things safety-wise that we need to go over. One of the most important is when taking down gondolas or Widespans, you want to make sure that you have 2 or more people to help with the buddy assist lifting, so team lift, and to make sure that nobody else is getting injured, so you're not doing it by yourself. You should also be wearing your proper PPE, which would be your gloves. And the biggest thing to remember is your pitch points. As far as when you're taking the stuff off the shelf, is knowing where your hands will be and working with your partner to make sure that everything gets taken down properly. So Chad and Tim here are going to demonstrate how to go ahead and take down the grid that's at the top shelf here. As you can see in the video, they properly came down the ladder, holding it together, and now what they want to do is they want to make sure that they have their art cart available so that they can take their product or their merchandise or whatever they have and put it on the art cart so it's not sticking out in your aisles or impeding with your customers if you are open. And now they'll continue on with the next side. It's very important when you're taking down the Widespans that you make sure that you start from the top and work your way down. So that way you have nothing at the top will fall down while you're trying to grab something on the bottom here. So, once you take your grid off, now we're going to go to the top and we're going to go ahead to this middle shelf and also take the grid off. Once we get all that off, then the next step in the process will be for us to take the beams and to take the supports off the shelf. So as you can see, Chad did take one beam off the center here. We're going to leave the back beam on the back sides here because that's what's going to help support this upright before we decide to take everything down. So that way the last step, we'll be taking this off so that at the end of this project we can take the upright here off. you can see, they've now taken all of the shelves off, but they've left the back beams on. So now what they're gonna do is they're gonna come in and they're gonna take the back beams off the shelves. So that way we can go ahead and take the uprights and set them off to the side, and that'll finish taking down and disassembling a wide span. So the one thing to remember when you're doing this step is as you're taking the back beam off, you want to be able to support the upright with one hand and be taking off the beam with the other hand. So that way this will not fall and tumble on somebody, won't tumble on you or your partner. So teamwork here is going to be the best option to make sure that the uprights get taken down properly. Now that we've disassembled the wide span, the next step in the process is we're going to show you how to reassemble and put up your wide spans. Before we get started, there are a couple things you need to make sure you have. Again, if you're just starting out on the project, the materials you're going to need is you want to make sure that you have your beams, you have your supports for the wide spans, you have either your grid or your wood, depending on what store you have. You have your uprights, you have your ladders, but most importantly, you have your staging map. Your map here is going to determine where in the locations your wide spans are going to be put up and placed on the floor. So you want to make sure that you have your floor plans, you want to make sure that you have a plan on how you're going to want to put it up and what you're going to put it up on. You can get your plans and everything from your store directors, team members from the stores. They should have the plans for you to let you know how to put them up. The other thing you need is a tape measure. So that way, when you're putting up your profiles, you can measure and make sure that you're getting your profile set into the proper locations. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to show you how to assemble the wide span. So before you go and put up your beams on your upright, the biggest thing you want to remember is these triangles that are on here, they have to face a certain way. If the triangle is the smallest portion of the triangle is not facing down, your beam will not fit in here properly, which could cause accidents or your beams to fall off. So when you're installing this, before you put your beams on, always make sure that your triangles here, the smallest portion, is facing down to the floor. Okay, so after you have everything laid out and all your uprights are built, and before you get to the next step of building your end cap and put it on, the biggest thing you got to keep in mind is you want to make sure that your uprights here, they form an X. So that way it's a proper alignment of how the uprights are supposed to face it. If these are facing out, you don't have that much support that you need to do it. So it's always important to make sure when you're putting these on and these are up and installed properly, it should form an X once it's all said and done. Okay, so before Chad and Tim get started on assembling the uprights and the wide spans here, again, one thing we'll talk on is your PPE. I always want to make sure that you have your safety gloves, some kind of protective things on your hands to protect yourself from the shelves or any of the elements while you're building and putting up your wide spans. Okay, so when you go in and install your Widespan supports, the biggest thing you want to make sure is you start from the middle with your supports and you work your way up. The reason why we start with the middle is because it has the most give so that you can do the supports. So once you start to get it in, then all you gotta do is put your proper placement with your supports. With 4 being on the bottom shelf where your wood is and your grid. Okay, so when you get to this part of the shelves where you're installing your grid and your Widespan supports, some stores only have this grid and some stores have the wood. And if you have the wood, you want to make sure when you're putting your supports in that you only put 4 supports for this shelf. If you guys have grids, these grids come in 4 feet for each section. So for each section, there should be 3 supports for each 4-foot grid that you're putting on your shelf. 3 supports, 3 supports. When you're putting the shelf, when you're putting this grid on, the most important part is your thinner lines that are on here should be facing you when you put them on the shelf, and the big circles, the long dowel pegs that are right here, are the ones that's going to help support it on the supports that are right here. So as you're putting them on, the biggest thing to remember is your pinch points. As you're putting them on, don't put your hand stuck here so that when you get in and your hand can get stuck under the shelf, because that'll cause a hazard where you can hurt your fingers, you're going to hurt your partner's fingers, you know, stuff like that.